Good morning and welcome to the EZFX Trading Room broadcast for 2016, July 18th. It's Monday morning and we're going to go back into our charts, which we last updated on Friday, and take a look at where we are since the market opened Sunday afternoon, 5 p.m. New York time. Before we do that, I want to review the watch list. It's always a good idea to review your watch list just so you remember what you were looking at last week, and then systematically go through each of those things you were looking at, because it's easy to forget, even if one day passes, what you were looking at. And if you don't consistently go back and look at what you're interested in, you will miss opportunities. So to avoid that, we are going to do this every day, and I've found it to be very useful. And remembering ideas, taking advantage of ideas, and making sure that no matter how long it takes for an idea to actually become an actionable trade, that we stick with it. So let's look at what we were watching. We were watching the euro dollar and pound dollar buy. We have several open trades. The dollar peso buy is open. All Aussie dollar sell is open. The dollar Swiss sell is open. Also euro newsy buy, pound yen buy, pound yen buy, euro pound sell, pound cad buy, pound newsy buy, pound Aussie buy, and pound Swiss buy. These are all open trades. And since we're starting a new week, I can go ahead and clear out our trade results section. I also make a new list every week. I think it's a good habit. But I keep the old list in this text file, and that means that I can always go back and look at what I did the previous week. Okay, so let's go to the charts and see what these pairs are doing. And if there's anything new that's happened, any new trade setups, I'll also add these to the chart and go ahead and explain exactly what we're doing to the setups. If you have any questions, you can always use the chat room on this page, post your question, and at the end of the broadcast, I will answer all of your questions as quickly as possible. So let's go to the charts. Let's start with the watching section. Let's look at the euro dollar buy and see where it's at. Okay, so the pair has moved sideways, and it's still moving sideways. I really don't see a setup on this yet. And as I said before, we have this sideways action for the past several days where the triangular moving average is constantly changing color. We don't have a class A supplier demand zone indicating that it's, and we don't have a breakout. And so really what I'm looking for in this trade would be a class A demand zone, a blue box here with some divergence and a breakout, and then maybe to fall back to it to retrace to a point where we could buy it with a good risk to reward ratio. Right now, there's just simply no momentum on this pair. It's just moving sideways. So I'm going to keep it on the watch list. I'd like to trade the euro dollar. And I think there's something that has to be done about this Brexit drop. But so far, nothing. So we're just going to leave it in the watching section of the list. Next, let's go to the pound dollar. There it is. And if you recall, I'm looking for a second chance buy trade on this pair. It broke out with the other pound pairs. I had already tried it to get into it twice, and my rule is if I stop out twice on a setup that I have to wait a week. And in waiting a week, I wasn't able to take this entry as I did on the other pound pairs. So it progressed quite nicely on that setup, went to the original initial profit target and dropped. And at the end of the week Friday, it hit this new high with the class A signal here, which is it's a close signal. I mean, it could have taken profit there if I was in it, but I did not, because I think this pair is going to go further. I think because it dropped so far on Brexit that once some good news comes out, hopefully there will be good news, that I think it can at least get to this month's monthly pivot. So that's my current profit target. But I'm not in it. So potentially this zone here could be an entry point for me on this. Right now, the triangular moving average is bearish. I had a sell bubble here, a buy bubble here. But if I got a new buy bubble, or I got a positive change in the color of the triangular moving average, if I have two things that confirm a trade, and the required stop is hopefully less than 150 pips, then I would consider going ahead and trying to buy this, putting a stop below this new zone here. And I could have an initial profit target to the monthly pivot, and then I could trend follow the rest to a higher target. Maybe last month's monthly pivot, for example, would be a nice target to go for. So this, to my mind, hasn't given me the confirmation that I need to try it, but that would be a second chance entry when it does happen, and I'm still watching for that. So we'll check it again tomorrow and see if it's done that. All right, moving on to the open trades. Dollar peso buy. What's that done for us? This has moved right along. We had a Class A signal right here, which gave us a pretty good entry after the breakout. Remember, these zones don't appear until the breakout has occurred and moved a little bit. So maybe 126 pip stop. The first target is 309 up here. It almost got there and then dropped back. But the triangular moving average is still blue. And I'm thinking this is going to resume in the next couple of days, and hopefully at least get to this initial profit target, which is the monthly pivot. So this is open. I think it hasn't really done anything too exciting since the market opened, so we're still waiting for that continuation of the move. Next, Aussie dollar sell, open trade. This is it's kind of the mirror image of that dollar peso in a way. It dropped and it came back and it's moving sideways, but it looks like it's ready to go a little further, hopefully to get to last week's weekly pivot, which is our first target. And I'm still pretty happy with this. It still looks pretty good to me, and hopefully we'll get to that target in the next day or so. Next, dollar Swiss sell. So this dropped nicely, and then now the triangular moving average has changed color, and it had a big kind of move back to the entry price. So there's a couple things you can do with this. One is you can just hold on to it. We've already set our risk, our stops. We have our targets planned. You can see if it's going to drop. You can also take this triangular moving average color change as an early exit signal and go ahead and exit the trade at break even or a small loss and wait for the next valid setup. And that would be the most conservative choice on this trade. So the idea is we want to minimize losses, maximize gains. If it shows any sign after it's progressed a while that it's reversing, it probably is, and probably holding on to it isn't going to get us much of anything. So I'm going to go ahead and close this. And just say we did a loss cut on it. Right, Euro Newsy buy, open trade. This has gone extremely well. Had a buy bubble. This is textbook, right? Buy bubble, Class A zone, which is the demand zone plus divergence. confirmed later by the triangular moving average color change, and it actually returned to the box. We really get a really tight stop on the entry. The initial profit target was the weekly pivot from 3 weeks ago, and it hit that. So we move our stop to break even and took parts of the profit off the table here. And then we do have some class B. It's just divergence all by itself, which we generally don't believe, especially because we have a demand zone down here. And we can go after the final target here at 1.5823. This is a spot for second chance entry. If you want to get into this trend in the buy direction, you can go ahead and buy the pair here. You have a class B demand zone. You need about 143 pip stop. You need to size your trade accordingly so that you're only risking 1% on that trade. But you can get into this trade at this point. And then your initial profit target would probably be the monthly pivot. And once you hit that, you can either take your full profit or take half of your position or a portion of your position off the table, move the stop to break even, and just follow the trend until you get a close signal, like an opposite class A or a triangular moving average color change. But that is a second chance entry on this Euro Newsy trade. Pound yen buy, open trade. Now, all the pound pairs had this little drop on Friday before the close. I think this was just profit taking. I don't think this was news driven, or specifically. I think people got a pretty good bump out of the week, and they were worried about the weekend news cycle and what they might wake up to with a gap down or a big drop on where the market opened. So they took profit for the week, and this happened last week too. When there's volatility like that, there's been a gain. I think people tend to dump it on Friday just so they can walk away for the weekend with no risk on their books and book some profit. And that's really what happened. And you saw that after the close, or right before the close, there was a little bit of a bump back in the buy direction. Some people saw this drop and they wanted to go ahead and buy the dip because they're anticipating the continuation of this trend in the buy direction. And I think this is going to rise again. It's a little bit early in the week, but I do think that we can at least get to our second target on this trade, which is the monthly pivot at 143.5650. And that's not too far away. We almost got there last week. Option to trend follow on this trade. Do be aware in the yen pairs that a lot of this isn't just the pound recovering, happened on the dollar yen too. A lot of this is the post-election euphoria or bump, I should say. I don't know if anybody's happy about the election results of Shinzo Abe and the Liberal Democratic Party. They were able to consolidate their gains in the upper diet, and right after that, you saw the dollar yen jump because he was talking about doing more economic stimulus, I think, right after. So he was talking up the pair a little bit. It didn't go as far as it's gone in the past, but it did go, from a low before the election all the way up to here, but it may drop again. So just be aware of that. It is giving us a sell signal here. We have had a sell bubble recently. Let's mark that so it's easy to understand, easy to see. That's a little bit far away. I'd like to see a new one, but sometimes they're there. And then you see the second signal, which is the Class A supply zone. And really on those two things, you can go ahead and think about selling that pair. If you want to wait for the triangular moving average to change color, you can. Sometimes it's already started moving when that happens. And it's sort of a trailing indicator more than a leading indicator. We do sell this, then the stop is going to be right above this supply zone. We can use this new weekly pivot here which is actually right at the monthly pivot, which is convenient. So let's just use the same monthly pivot we used before as our final profit target on the buy. And for our final profit target, I think it's going to go back down quite a bit. We can check our trade space by just pulling a Fibonacci retracement on this entire move. And we can see that initial profit target is only really below the 38.2, which is pretty conservative. For a first target. I could put the second target at this last week's weekly, or 2 weeks ago weekly pivot from 2 weeks ago at 102.5157. That'd be just above a 61.8% retracement, which is also acceptable. And the required stop on this at this point in time is going to be 132. It's about a 1-to-1 to the first target, which is within our rules. We have to have at least 1-to-1 for the first target. And then the final target would be 301, which is, a little better than 2-to-1, that's an acceptable trade setup. So I'm going to add the, let's see, dollar yen sell. New trade. And so on the pound yen, that's my only caveat, is this is also setting up a sell trade. And the yen is going to be dragged down just because this was a post-election bump. There is some drive by the pound here, though. I mean, I think you had two things that happened for the pound yen. You had the pound recovering a bit from Brexit, and so it followed that pattern. Plus, you had the election bump. But when the fundamentals of the Japanese economy are such that there's probably a sell trade in here for this pair too. The only problem, let's see if it's a problem or not. Yeah, the stop loss, the required stop loss is huge. It's over 350 pips if you use the top of the zone as the benchmark for setting your stop. So if you were going to get into this at all, you kind of have to wait till it gets back to the bottom of this zone, and then still you're looking at 190 pips. So the trade size would be very small to keep it below 1%, but you could potentially sell this in the near future. Right now I'm holding on to it. I think if the pound bumps a little bit before the yen drops, I think we can get to the second trade. The stop loss is already at break even, so there's no risk on this trade. So I'm just going to hold on to it and leave it open, and we'll see where we get. Next, let's look at the euro pound sell. All right. So we've hit our first profit target on this trade, and this was the Friday retracement. People got out of this and they kind of got back in it a little bit and moved down. And it's continued to move down slightly back to that initial profit target. We haven't had a new jump down to this demand zone, which was hit here, creating a Class A signal in the opposite direction. But I do expect it to fall. This trade is still open. Stop is at break even. The final profit target is the monthly pivot. Pound CAD, buy trade. Pullback on Friday. It's recovered a bit. Still holding on to this with a stop at break even. Trying to punch through this opposite direction Class A zone and sell signal to get to this month's monthly pivot. Still no change, really. Next trade, pound newsy buy, another open trade. Same thing, except this recovered pretty quickly on the open. Pulled back, created a Class A sell zone. We had a sell bubble here. I'm going to try to punch through this. I'm pushing on this. I'm going to ignore this reversal signal in this case, just because the fundamentals I think are so strong for it to go higher. and it recovered here nicely. Big bump as people bought in again, and we'll see if we can get to the monthly pivot. So it's pretty much the same story with all these pound pairs. Same kind of target, same kind of thing has happened with the price action. Pound Aussie, again, it had a class B signal in the opposite direction, sell bubble, but it's trending slightly in the direction of our trade. We want to get to the first target at this weekly pivot here from 2 weeks ago. And I'm anticipating that breakout and that move in that direction at some point in the near future. Finally, the pound Swiss buy. And this has, it sort of looks like the euro dollar in a way. It's moving sideways a little bit. We're having, as it moves sideways, we have frequent color changes in the direction of the triangular moving average, waiting to punch through that class A zone and get to the final profit target at the monthly pivot. So I'm still happy with all of these. I don't think they're collapsing. We did have opposite signals, but for the reasons I described, because of the fundamentals, the size of the Brexit drop and the lack of a credible retracement up to now on that drop, even though we've hit a 35 low on a lot of these pound pairs, I think there's enough room there to at least get to the monthly pivot on any good news at all that comes out about the British government, about Brexit, about something concrete happening that has direction and structure in the UK. So I'm still waiting for that to happen, but I'm holding on to these trades with the stops at break even. The only one of these that doesn't have a stop at break even at this point is the pound Aussie. So that's really the only open risk that I have on this portfolio at this time. I haven't seen any other setups that I'm interested in particular. Looks like the newsy dollar may be getting ready to set up a buy trade, right? We have, let's see if this zone is class A or not. It's a class B zone. There's no divergence touching this zone, no bullish divergence here. It has hit this and bounced before. It's returned to it again. We still have the triangular moving average showing a bearish trend, but we've already had a buy bubble right there. Let me just mark that. And I mark these bubbles just because, and I think it's a good habit to get into because visually it's easy to miss them until you get really used to it. So go ahead and mark your bubbles. And we've hit the zone. This combination here gives us more than enough reason to buy the pair. Again, you can wait for additional confirmation. You can do that by, for example, setting a trend line over the most recent trend to waiting for the trend line break, waiting for a triangular moving average. You can try to get, four points of confirmation on this trade if you so desire. At this point in time, the required stop loss is 47. So we have some room to wait. I wouldn't be uncomfortable waiting, especially for a trend line break, because this also looks to me, just based on having seen hundreds and hundreds of these, that it could drop further and that the actual setup might be at one of these zones below. That happens too. But I do like this. I'm going to go ahead and set this up on our list as a new trade in the buy direction. Profit targets on this. We have a nice pivot there. So depending on where you get in, if that's greater than 1-to-1, that could be your first profit target, last week's weekly pivot. And then if we were just going to confirm sort of the scale of this trade by setting Fibonacci levels on this move, that target would be over 50%. So we could just set another one. At this 78.6% level. So let's add this is our second new trade. We have a newsy dollar. buy trade, and that's new. Well, that's all that I have in terms of updates and new setups at this point in time. Right now, if you have any questions, I want to go to the chat room, and please post your questions there. And we can look at anything you want. I could explain anything you have a question about these setups. And let's just see if we have any questions. Right now, we don't. However, when you do have a question, you can just post to the chat room. You can do this at any time. You can use this chat room in addition to the community features on this site to interact. When you're trading, it's kind of fun. I'll get online and you can talk about the charts you're looking at, the trades you're looking at. It really helps because most of us, if not all of us, we trade by ourselves. We don't necessarily have close friends who are also trading. A lot of times this is something we do sort of privately. And it's nice to get on anonymously with just other people trading the same system, even if you're not trading the same system, and talk about it and trade together and exchange information. Even things that aren't related to trading, you can talk about as long as it's respectful and doesn't become abusive in any way. Okay, well, there's no questions today, so I'm going to close the today's trading room. Thanks very much for attending. I think we have some exciting things happening this week in the market, and I'm looking forward to catching up with you again tomorrow. If you look at our schedule, that's our next scheduled broadcast, 8 a.m. Eastern time. And I will see you then. Take care.